Conservative media personality Megyn Kelly is facing ridicule on Twitter after she mocked First Lady Jill Biden for using the title of doctor after receiving a PhD. This all started when Kelly tweeted, quote, "Announcers for this Eagles-49ers game just spotted the First Lady in a box and, of course, call her Dr. Jill Biden. Wonder if she realizes what a wannabe she looks like, insisting on this fake title. Get a real MD or just work on your self-esteem." Then many on Twitter were saying that Kelly had not had a problem referring to MAGA warrior and PhD Sebastian Gorka as Dr. Sebastian Gorka. I always use the title Dr. Sebastian Gorka to communicate what an important individual he is.
Somebody call the family of Dr. Martin Luther King and tell him that it's inappropriate to put the doctor in front of his name because he was not a medical doctor.
It is true, though, that who was it? Was Whoopi Goldberg, right? Do you remember that?
Who thought she really was a medical doctor?
I mean, that was embarrassing. And, you know, there but for the grace of God go all of us, those of us who have to sometimes make unscripted observations on television shows in real time. Ought to be really careful about criticizing someone else for doing this. But here I go, not being cautious. When Whoopi talked about how great it would be to have Dr. Jill Biden in the White House because, you know, she as a medical doctor would have expertise on the coronavirus or something. Not that kind of doctor.
Not that kind of doctor. Although someone who has a PhD in various things, I don't know, epidemiology, other things that aren't medical doctoring, could have insight into the coronavirus pandemic. I think we quoted Dr. Stephen Thrasher earlier in the show, who's a journalist and an expert on virology. Certainly you can have doctorates in things that help in that realm. Her doctorate in education, I believe, is not one of those things. But look, this does just feel like part of this endless gripe fest. Republicans do it, Democrats do it. We find dumb little nitpicky things to talk about the other person. Look, the Eagles
it was a tweet. It's
going
not what she's
to the
about.
Super Bowl is a thing for us to be celebrating, not picking over Jill Biden and how she's referred to in the stands. By the way, it's not like she called the announcer up and said, "You got to call me Dr. Jill Biden." This idea that like she's being an egomaniac about this is also kind of misplaced feeling.
Yeah. Are there previous examples of her insisting on that or something?
I don't think there's anybody. I mean, look, there are people
the
who
mainstream media does
notoriously
love to refer to her as Dr. Jill Biden. Right?
I'm of two minds about this. Obviously, I understand that it can seem snobbish, elitist to insist on a title. On the other hand, I come from a community where we were always taught to respect people's titles and to say them the same way that I think certain kind of communities are more traditional in calling people ma'am and sir and things like that. And particularly, I think among Black people for so many years, not being spoken to in a certain amount of respect in the public, being referred to like boy and things like that. When people do get degrees, there's a lot of pride, and we always use them. So I always called my parents' friends to the extent that they had credentials, Dr. Nelson, Dr. Claire, Dr. whomever it was.
My parents
some of them are medical doctors.
Credentials.
Yeah, some of them were medical doctors. Some of them. My mom was in a PhD program when I was little, so a lot of her friends, from that part of her life, obviously had PhDs as well. Now, that's a separate thing from being the kind of person who is a lawyer and makes everybody call them doctor. I think it's a thin line and it's context dependent. But look, I think it's an interesting thing that Jill Biden has this background in education, which I think is probably informs her perspective in useful, interesting ways, and that is a nice thing for first ladies to be increasingly have opportunities and backgrounds and academic histories that historically first ladies didn't have. And to the extent that she's proud of that and that is acknowledged in her labeling, I can't muster the energy to be offended by it.
Yeah, I guess I don't have a lot to say about it either. I think it's fine to call her Dr. Jill Biden. I think it's fine to not. There's a little bit of sort of over-credentialing everyone. But actually now, doctor has to stand in for, because, some people don't want you to use Mr. and Mrs. or Ms. because those are gendered. So doctor is going to end up doing more heavy lifting in order to avoid on forms and things calling people Mr. and Ms., et cetera. I'm right about that. I'm right.
That's fine. I think it's great. I think it's, come on. Do you think that there should be
in a leftist view, aren't we all supposed to be called comrade or something?
I think that's great too. But the idea
Briahna.
that there are all of these weird choices for women based on your marriage status, and there's just the one for men. I mean, like, that doesn't seem to, feminism or not, that just seems like unnecessarily complicated. And I have to like check the marital status or something. Like, I think the Ms. innovation was a good one. Language changes, people change. And look, if Megyn Kelly, who is an attorney.
Ms. Next, you're going to want women voting and owning property. Sheesh.
I think that maybe we should just turn the tables and give Megyn Kelly the respect of calling her Dr. Megyn Kelly. She has a Juris Doctorate. She is an attorney. Right. And I would also like to be called Dr. Gray from this point out.
Oh, God. So attorneys are technically doctors?
Yeah. We're all doctors, baby. Except for you, apparently, Robbie. You better pick up the slack.
I don't have any special credentials or any fancy book learning. Only street smarts for me. Okay, I'm streetwise.
Dr. Asphalt.
I am a junior. But I never make people say that or really.
I don't know that you needed to admit that, because now the comment section are going to be filled with what's Junior talking about today. It's going to be the new diminutive for you, Robbie.
That's fine. I was about due for a new one. Okay, let's leave it there. We'll talk to you later. More Rising after this.